Okay, shall we? So I'm Maya Tripp. I'm the Jewish Life and Culture Director here at Jewish Silicon Valley. And I have Aviv Matzkin and Rabbi Chaim here with me, and we will introduce them in a minute. I just wanted to show you our beautiful Passover card in the lobby. You can stop by, you can appreciate it, you can take a look at the different Haggadahs. I heard we have some really classic ones and also very unique ones. So you are welcome to stop by. It will be here until after Passover. We also have some other activities for Passover. You can take a look at our calendar and I will also send it to you. So take a look, bring the kids, bring the grandkids, because we have some activities. You can learn about the holiday from our holiday guide. A lot of attention is behind this amazing card. So we are opening the Passover season. So happy holiday, happy pre-holiday. And we will start with hearing about Rabbi Chaim from Afikomen Judaica in Berkley, our guest today, about the different Haggadahs and how to maybe choose the right Haggadah for your family. And then we will meet Aviv Matzkin, our Jewish educator. And this meeting is recorded, and enjoy it and get ready for Passover. So let's start with you, Rabbi Chaim. Unmute yourself.
So my name is Rabbi Chaim Magel. Together with my wife, I'm the owner of Afikomen, Judaica for Inspired Living, afikomen.com, Judaica store that's been serving the greater Bay Area Jewish community and beyond for over 30 years. I've been involved about 16 and a half of those 30 plus years. And together with my wife, we've been the owner for about 14 years. Passover is a great busy time for us in the store, and one of the things, of course, that we're famous for is the range of Haggadot that we make available to the community. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, A, about the Haggadah, and B, about the experience of the seder, experiencing the Haggadah at the seder. So as Maya pointed out, there are many different varieties of translation and interpretation of the Haggadah. I think it's probably one of the most commented and commented on and reprinted Jewish books ever. Everybody has something to say about it. And you know, one of the things that I find is in dealing with people in the store is that what a lot of families come in, they want to get the Haggadah that's right for their family. What's going to be the guidebook? What's going to be the story that's going to speak more directly to our needs? And that's a great question. And that's a great concern, because obviously people want to be all on the same page as much as possible, both in terms of the text and in terms of the experience that you're trying to have everybody have. So that's a great question. What I see happening a lot of times is that the tendency is to then gear the seder down to the age of the youngest participant. It's like, oh, okay, well, we've got some grandkids now, so we're going to just do the Sammy Spider Haggadah, or we're going to, you know, do some other kind of, this is not the Sammy Spider Haggadah, this is a joyous Haggadah, but we're going to bring the level of the experience of the ritual and the ceremony down to the level of the youngest person, and kind of, you know, allow the older people to be off the hook and be hyper-focused about the food. And what I try to remind people, and not just on Passover, what I try to remind people is that really the Jewish holidays and our rituals and celebrations and ceremonies were really intended for adults. And that when we engage with them as adults with, you know, with our consciousness, with our intention, you know, with some information and background experience behind us, you know, then we have opportunity to get enthusiastic about what we're doing as a part of our ritual, spiritual Jewish practice. And when we're excited and when we're enthusiastic about it, that creates an atmosphere where other people can experience that enthusiasm from the adults as well. You get what I'm saying, adults? It's up to you to like get in the mood for yourself, and that will create an environment and an atmosphere that's going to be engaging and exciting for the kids. That being said, you also want to have the right materials. You want to have the right things available to engage the people who are going to be at the seder. So obviously, if your crew, if your people who are going to be participating in this going out of Egypt ritual commemoration reenactment with you are not familiar with Hebrew or are not comfortable with a lot of Hebrew, obviously in something that has transliteration, what do they call it, a phonetic kind of language for you to be able to repeat perhaps some of the brachot, some of the important blessings in the Hebrew language, even if you can't read Hebrew. So that would be an important thing to look for. And also it's important to be able to access the different rituals with the language that you're familiar with. Because I think the Mishnah also says, that you have to be able to understand what the Haggadah is asking you to do. So if it's, if you're talking about matzah, if you're talking about karpas, dipping in salt water, like you have to understand what these things are and not just have them in front of you, but and then be prepared to answer the question when somebody says, why salt water? Why this? And that's what the Haggadah is going to come and do. The Haggadah is going to show you all the things that you have to do the seder. And Aviv is going to go into that in more detail. So the Haggadah, more than being the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the Haggadah is really serving as the guidebook, the ritual manual, the how-to set up the Passover Seder plate, set up the Seder table, and to then guide your assembled people through the ritual of the Seder, which has a lot of different parts to it. There's three things about the Seder in general that I just wanted to highlight. One thing to make a more enjoyable Seder, a lot of people recognize that there are 4 questions that are part of the Seder, but there's one primary question that really everybody has even before the Seder begins, and that's when do we eat? So in order to avoid being starving when the Seder is actually still in the early stages, the rabbis introduced karpas, which is vegetable that you dip in salt water, but it could be any vegetable. It could be anything that you make the bracha borei pi adama on. I might be bleeding over here a little bit into Aviv's drasha, but I just wanted to say, put a lot of vegetables on the table. Cut up a bunch of things that people can be noshing, what people can be eating until you get to the Seder, so that people don't have to be feeling anxious about not having enough food to get them through the Seder. The other thing is to remember that the Seder doesn't all have to take place around the table, right? You can start in the living room. You can start telling the story and going through some of the preliminary dialogue of the Haggadah, in a more comfortable setting, and then shift to the table for the table-oriented experience. And then the third thing is, just as much as we're talking about guests and menus and food and all of these things, it is important to focus on the content of the experience as well. And that's where the Haggadah really comes in. So I just wanted to highlight that a few of the Haggadot that have been very popular in the store. We'll start with the youngest ones, right? I don't know, are you seeing, you're seeing probably my video backwards. Let me see if I can do this. Do this differently.
Chaim, we saw that perfectly, actually.
Oh, you saw it perfectly? Okay,
Yes.
Sorry about that. I thought it looked backwards to me, but what do I know? Let me change that again, I'm sorry. And okay, so you saw this. This is my very own Haggadah. It's published by Carbon Publishing. This is a great Haggadah for kids because it not only has all the stages of the seder, but it also functions as a coloring book. So it really is something that's engaging and can last, throughout the Passover holiday. So that's a great Haggadah for kids. I mentioned, I wanted to point out also this Haggadah. This is a different night Haggadah. This version, this red version, is the participant version. There's a thicker version, which is the leader version of this Haggadah. This was done by Rabbi Noam Tzion from Yerushalayim. And his whole approach to everything that he does is about getting people to be able to access the text and to access the ritual and to feel like there's a way for them to be able to be engaged in the experience. So it's very well laid out. It's very unpretentious. There's a lot of different art and expression here to engage people. You could even do little craft experiences as well. His son, Mishael Tzion, happens to be here in Berkeley for the year, and together with his father, he created this Haggadah called A Night to Remember. And the difference between the two versions, this is a different night, this is A Night to Remember. This version, the commentaries and the sources to illuminate the story and the ritual are drawn from classic Jewish sources. This version, or this book, which is a different book altogether, The Night to Remember, the commentaries and the art are all drawn from contemporary sources, contemporary voices commenting. And the representation, is more contemporary and more egalitarian. There's some great things for people to look at and engage with in the Haggadah as well. So you have more kind of things for a slightly older crowd. You're thinking already like middle schoolers, older middle schoolers, to young adults. There's a lot to look at there. One of the classic Haggadot that I saw, I think, on your cart is the Santa Cruz Haggadah.
First, we have this one.
You have that one in Hebrew, right? That's the A Night to Remember, and you have also the Santa Cruz Haggadah. The Santa Cruz Haggadah was written by Karen Rokard, who's a local Berkeley resident, and it was done quite a while ago. But again, because the message is the experience of Passover is about integrating our own personal experience and reference points into the historical story of our people and the rituals that we engage to connect to those stories. There's a lot of really interesting and contemporary orientation that we could relate to, especially us in Berkeley. I hope it's the same in Silicon Valley, to some of these concepts here. And in particular, I'll just tell you what we do at our seder is we have a lot of Haggadot. We're not concerned that everybody is on the same exact page number, but we kind of help people get where we're all doing the same ritual around the same time. And people can be looking at all kinds of different resources to inform their experience. And then we encourage them to share. What are you seeing in your Haggadah? What are you bringing from your experience as a person, from your own life? What experience are you bringing from other seders that you've participated in other locations or other times? So I love the Santa Cruz Haggadah. And in fact, the part from this Haggadah that we use every year is the part at the Seder where you open the door for Eliyahu and Aviv, for Elijah the prophet, and you say this passage called Shvach Hamascha, which was instituted, Akiva can talk more, I think, directly to the sources of things, but this is a passage that's where we're asking God to pour out the wrath on those evil people in the world who still want to go wage war against innocent civilians and wreak havoc and destruction in the world. And she has a really brilliant language for that passage, for that ritual part of the seder. So we love that in that
Thank
Haggadah.
you so much, Rabbi Chaim, for the depth of the ideas. I think that I got some great ideas for my seder at home. And we invite everyone to take a look at what you just described here or in your store in Berkley. Also, you can connect to the store with this barcode here. So you can just connect to the store and see the different Haggadahs.
Right.
So thank you very much. And
so I'll just wrap up. I just want to say one thing, just a plug for the store. Thank you very much. But we have both our inside store and we are online. And for books, especially the Haggadot, we are online in two different ways. You can go to afikomen.com. It's in my name there. And click on books. You'll click on books that are in the store. There's one link. There's a bookshop link, which is purple, which is another link. Both of those links have Haggadot that you can search through and buy, and we can ship them to you. And we would also love to have you come up to the store. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Chag kosher v'sameach.
Chag Sameach. And Aviv Matzkin, our Jewish studies teacher from Hausner. Great to have you here.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I love what Chaim said. I didn't know he was going to say this. I do agree that you should gear your seder and your Haggadah discussion to the adult level with excitement, and the kids will rise to the occasion. And to do that, I'm going to give you a little help. This is a presentation that usually takes me an hour and a half, but I'm going to give it as best I can in the time we have left. And my hope is that you will come away with a few insights that will help you during your seder. So I just have to say that I love Pesach, but I've always been confused by the Haggadah. I went to day school. I knew the songs. I knew the words to it. But what I thought we were supposed to do is tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, getting out of Egypt. That's in the Chumash. That's in the Torah. So I was always confused why we didn't get together and just pull out the story and read it, until I read a book, which I highly recommend. I'll show you at the end again. It's called Leading the Passover Journey, The Seder's Meaning Revealed. And what the author, Rabbi Nathan Laufer, said is the whole story of Egypt from little baby Moses until Mount Sinai is hidden in the Haggadah. And it's meant to be that way. And when you sit down and you read over the story, you should be trying to find the hidden story there. So I'm going to show you parts of the Torah. Where we start is in Exodus 13, when Moses says to the people, this is what you're going to do on Passover. God has brought you out of Egypt. For 7 days, I want you to eat matzot. Don't eat chametz. Vehigadeta levincha bayom hahu. And on that day, I want you to tell your children, ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li. Because of this, God did to me when I came out of Egypt. This is where the word Haggadah comes from. Vehigadeta. You are supposed to tell your children the story of coming out of Egypt. Okay, so why don't I just pull out the book of Exodus and do that? Well, it turns out that the story is hidden right there in 15 steps. Now, your job as we're studying together today is to interrupt me with lots of questions. And that's because during the seder, that's exactly what the designers of the Haggadah imagined you would do. The leader would stand up and say, everybody, we are now going to say Kiddush. And hopefully someone would raise their hand and say, oh, why do we do Kiddush? And the leader might say, well, you know, all holidays, Shabbat starts with Kiddush. All holidays are going to start with Kiddush, and we're going to wash our hands today too. So let's everybody wash our hands. And then someone should raise their hand and say, but why? Is this just washing? But hands are washed without reciting a blessing. I thought we were supposed to say a blessing. Now, usually your leader is going to start flipping through the Haggadah a different night to see the explanation. Why don't we say a blessing? Why are we washing our hands? And often they're going to say, you know what? We've got a lot of things to do before the food comes. And as Rabbi Chaim said, you're all hungry. So let's go to the first step, and we'll come back to that one a little later. Everybody, I'd like you to take a green vegetable right now, dip it in salt water, and join me in the blessing here. And I'm hoping this year you are going to say, whoa, before we do it, could you, leader, explain to me why we're dipping a green vegetable in salt water? And you know what your leader is going to say? Your leader is going to say exactly what my foil is going to say, Shira Klein.
Karpas. All right, it's about to get colorful in here, everybody. Oh, and tasty. And a little bit salty. And sweet. Karpas is the Hebrew word for green veggies, and basically it's our appetizers tonight. But why green veggies for hors d'oeuvres instead of cheese and crackers? Green for springtime. Green for new growth. So for Karpas, we're going to take some beautiful green parsley, or you can use other green things like celery or lettuce. And then we do something very curious. We will dip the parsley into a bowl of salty water. Because, after all, the Passover holiday really does tell the story of our feelings. And this salt water is our salty tears for the times that we have felt so stuck.
Hold on a second, leader. Let me get this straight. You're taking green parsley, which represents springtime, and dipping it in salt water, which represents being stuck. And exactly what are you trying to say? That doesn't make sense. Dip springtime. And the reason the leader is saying this is because the leader doesn't know that actually we are meant to figure out what's happening in the story of Exodus. So here we go. Let's go to the story of Exodus. Here's how it began. Joseph died, and the Israelites were fertile, and they multiplied and increased and filled the land. You know what that's like? Well, the gardeners in this group know very well that that's like parsley. When you plant a few seeds of parsley, it is going to start to spread all over your planting box. And, it becomes a bit of a misery here. And if you think, whoa, parsley, don't spread so much. Oh, I'll try to pick you out over here. And this new king, he tried the same thing. This new king said, these Israelite people are too numerous for us. Let's put them under slavery. That'll stop them. And you know what happens when you pick that parsley over on this side? Well, it starts to grow over there. And that's what the Israelites did. They started to spread and grow. And the king said, whoa, my gosh, this is not working. This parsley, these Israelites are everywhere. I know what I'll do. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to dip them in the salt water. And the Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every boy that is born, you shall throw him into the Nile. And you can imagine the parents having to do this, or the soldiers coming and grab them. What horror, what terror. And when you dip your parsley into the salt water, that is exactly what you are doing. You are reliving the story. And, in my family, when we do this, we don't use parsley. We use potatoes instead. And when we use the potatoes, well, it's kind of delicious, like Chaim said. We're going to fill ourselves up. But you know what? I think I'm going to start using parsley now, because parsley is partially bitter. And when I dip that bitter parsley into the salt water, I'm going to start choking on it and say, why did you make me do this? And the leader's going to say, because we've started our journey, my friends. This is a terrible story. This is a story of choking in the beginning. When something was told to us, our baby boys were told to be dipped in the Nile, and we are choking. But wait, everybody, as you're choking, I got to tell you something. We're going to take the middle matzah and we're going to break it in half. Oh, this is going to be so great. And you now are going to raise your hand and say, oh, great leader, why are we doing this? And the leader's going to say, hold on, let me look in my Haggadah that Rabbi Chaim. Oh, yes. Oh, it just says right here. Break the middle matzah and hide the half for the Afikomen. So that's why we do it.
Kadesh urchatz, karpas yachatz. Yachatz. It's time for a karate chop yachatz. We're going to break a matzah, y'all. Okay, let's see. Look around your table and look for that ceremonial plate with 3 matzot. That's the plural of matzah. Now, the top and the bottom one, we will leave whole for a special blessing later. And the middle one, that is going to be our yachatz. Now, when we break this matzah for yachatz, we'll keep the smaller half on the table right there in the middle of our ceremonial stack to always remind us that not all folks have a lot. And we'll take the larger half and we'll save it for dessert. Okay, you ready? We're breaking the matzah. Here we go. Yachatz! Nice. Okay, now I'm going to take the larger half of this and place it into a very special napkin or bag called the Afikomen, which will be our dessert. And we will carefully place this on the table so that no one steals the Afikomen and hides it. Because we can't end the seder without eating this special dessert, obviously. So keep your eye on the Afikomen!
Okay, I'm keeping my eyes up, but I still don't understand why we're doing this here. I mean, I thought we were telling the story of the Israelites, and now you want to hide something for a prize later? Well, okay, I'm going to help you now. Here's what we're going to do. First, you need to know that there are actually 3 matzahs in a special holder here. Maybe you don't do this, but this will confuse people if you don't. And believe it or not, these matzahs have names. The top one is Kohen, the middle one is Levi, and the bottom one is Israel. And we're going to take the middle one, the Levi, and we're going to break it in half, and we're going to hide it. And you're going to say, why do I need to know it's called Levi? Well, you need to know it's called Levi because Chapter 2 of the book of Exodus begins as follows. A certain man from the house of Levi married a woman from the house of Levi. The woman bore a child. And you know what she did? She hid the child. Why did she hide the child? Oh, yes. They were coming after the baby boys. And when she could no longer hide the child, she decided to make a wicker basket, a really good covering for that baby, and put him away so no one would find him. That way I could go back and get him and save my little baby. When the soldiers, they come to the house, I can say, I don't have a little baby. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to watch what would happen. And sure enough, another daughter found the baby. It's Pharaoh's daughter. Opened it up and said, here's a Hebrew child. And the little girl, the baby's sister, said, oh, I bet you can't feed that child. You're not breastfeeding. I know someone who could. And Pharaoh's daughter said, you find me a woman who can breastfeed and I will pay you money. I will pay your wages. And so guess what's happening? When we break that middle matzah, what we are actually doing is breaking Moshe away from his family. How do we know that? We took the Levi, and he's from the house of Levi. We broke it, just like he was broken from his family. We put it in a special cover, just like he was put in a special basket, and we hide it away. And later, someone's going to go look for it, probably a child. And when they find it, someone's going to be paid money, just like the story here. And so, after they break the matzah, the leader's going to say, okay, everybody, I'm going to now go on to the magid, the storytelling. Oh, well, actually, if you've done a good job, you've been telling the story already. But here's what they're going to say. Ha lach ma'ania, di achalu. This is the bread of affliction, which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. All who are hungry, let them come and eat. All who are needy, let them come and celebrate the Passover for us. We were slaves, now we're free. And you're going to raise your hand and say, something weird just happened there. I know a little Hebrew, but what you were saying, halach ma'ania, doesn't sound like Hebrew. And the leader will say, oh, I think it's Aramaic. And you're going to ask, why did we switch languages? Because up until this point, we were doing Hebrew. And they're going to say, I don't know. That's in the Haggadah. And now you're going to say, maybe it has something to do with what happens next in the story. Ah, well, what happens next? You know that child that was found on the side of the river? He went back to his mom's house for a few years to be fed and grown, probably in Hebrew. And then he was taken to Pharaoh's house, where he switched languages, probably Egyptian. And the first thing he does in his life, and this is all we learn about in Moshe in the beginning, is he goes out to help people. When the child grew up, he found an Egyptian taskmaster hitting an Israelite, and he sees that Israelite is my brother. I identify with that Israelite. I need to go help this needy person. And he turns this way and that way, no one else to help. He hits that Egyptian taskmaster, who dies, and he buries that Egyptian taskmaster. Right away, the next day, he sees two Israelites fighting. He steps in. That's not right. These two guys are in need. Stop fighting, guys. Doesn't quite work out. They say, who made you the boss? Are you going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? What? They know about that? Uh-oh, Pharaoh hears about it, and Pharaoh says, Moses has to die now too. So he runs away. And when he does his third act. Some of the Midianite, where he's landed, shepherds are keeping these girl shepherds away from the well. Moses chases them away, helps the girls. 3 acts of helping other people are his first 3 acts. And so we hold up this matzah and we say, if there is anybody today who is in need of assistance, who is a slave, who is troubled, we are like Moses and we will help them. We too, in the second language, will invite anyone in need of help. We are now telling the story through our actions, if we are doing the Haggadah justice. But we do need to know the story. And to do that, we need the kids, right? Here's the point at which we do. Hey, we got to the 4 questions. Let's see now. Who's the youngest child? Oh, you over there, little Yossel. You stand up and you ask the 4 questions. Now, Yossel's been practicing, but he's quite young. So he's a little bit worried. Sweat is starting. He's a little bit shaking. And someone should raise their hand right now and say, oh, great, seder leader. Why are we doing this to the young child? You can see he's not loving this so much. And why don't we help him sing? And the leader says, no, it says here the youngest should do it. But why? Why do we make the youngest do it? And why are there 4 questions? Now the leader's going to say, I don't know. It's in the Haggadah. Let's get going here. We're all hungry. But you can now stop them and say, maybe this has to do with what happens next in the story. And what happens next is Moses, who has been adopted into the family of those women shepherdesses, has married the oldest one, Zipporah, and her father, Yitro, has said, you know what, Moses? You're going to be my shepherd here. And one day, Moses is taking his sheep out, and he gets to the edge of the wilderness, and he sees an amazing thing, a burning bush. And he turns to the side. And from the burning bush comes God's voice. Moses, Moses, you got to go back to Egypt and free the people. And Moses says, absolutely, God. I am going to do what you... Wait, hold on, God. Before I go, I've just got one little question for you. Why did you pick me? Who am I to go to Pharaoh? And God says, doesn't matter why I'm going to be with you. It's okay. Just go. And Moses says, yes, I'm off. But, oh, wait, just one more little question. When I get to the Israelites and I said to them, God has sent me, they're going to say maybe which God? I mean, in Egypt, there are lots of gods. What's the name of your God? What should I say to them, God? And God says, Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh. Just tell them Ehiyeh sent you. And Moses says, right on it. Well, you know what? Well, just one more tiny question, just the third one. After that, I'm sure to go. You see, what if I tell them that you sent me, but they don't believe me? I mean, I'll sound like a crazy guy. What if they don't believe me? And God says, all right, you got a staff in your hand, throw it down. Here's a magic trick. Do that, and they're going to believe you. And Moses throws his staff down. It turns into a snake, and Moses is like, this is it. I am set to go. 3 questions. You know what, God? One last thing. I promise this is the very last. Just a 4th thing. One more thing. You see, I don't speak very well. I have heavy lips and heavy tongue. Any chance you could choose somebody else? At this point, God gets very angry and says, I chose you. Fine, if you need somebody else, you can have Aaron go and help you. And this is the 4 questions. The 4 questions that this young child has to stand up and ask, and shaking gets through, is a reenactment of Moses at the burning bush. Now, I have a question for you. Why the youngest child? If we know that this is Moses standing at the burning bush, what does that have to do with the youngest? Oh, I see some people whispering it. Moshe is the youngest of his family. There's Aharon, there's Miriam. I'm not sure who's first there. And then there's Moshe. He's the youngest. And as he stands before the burning bush, so this child does. So if they're a little bit frightened, tell them, that's perfect. You're doing a great job. And if you need a little help with your singing, we'll sing along with you, just as Moses had Aaron to come sing with him. And now we start the answer, the Maggid. And if we had a lot of time, well, I would go through with you the entire Maggid. It's quite complicated, but unfortunately, that will have to be for another session. What we're going to do now is to go to the end of Maggid, but I just want to tell you one thing. When Moses goes back to Pharaoh and he goes up to the Israelites and says, I've come to save you, I'm sure what they're thinking is, we are out of here. God sent Moses. God can do anything. Moses will get Pharaoh to let us go, and we're done. Let's eat. But that doesn't happen. There's a bunch of back and forth between Moses and God. Moses says, I came from God. Pharaoh says, I don't know who your God is. Moses says, let us go for 3 days. Pharaoh says, no way. And that back and forth is what's happening during Maggid. I tell my students in 2nd and 4th grade, the best thing you can do during Maggid is to start fetching. When is this going to end? And when the adults say, would you please behave yourself? You say, no, I'm just pretending I'm the Israelites. You know, Moses has come and said, we're getting out of here, but we're not out of here. The seder's still going. So are we done yet? And when the adults say, please sit down and wait. Well, that's not what the Israelites were doing. They were probably saying, Moses is here. We should be out of here. This is not going well. Are we ever going to end the seder? And fortunately, somewhere during Maggid, as this back and forth is going on, we will have the 10 plagues come. The 10 plagues. Now we get to do something. Everybody take your finger and dip in the wine. We're getting close to the food. I know it. But you know what? The 10 plagues don't do it either. So there's a little more Maggid going on. There's a little more back and forth between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yoshua arguing about how many plagues really was it? 10, 15, 50, 100. Are we out of here yet? Mom, is this ever going to end? Am I going to be stuck in this seder forever? No, because we finally, at the end of this long Maggid, get to a cup of wine. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, finally, something exciting is happening. And you're going to raise your hand and say, I'd really like to get to the food now, but why are we drinking this cup of wine right now? And why are there 4 cups of wine? And the leader's going to say, let me look in my handy Haggadah. Oh, yes, it says here, God promised us that God will free us from the labor of the Egyptians. 1, God will deliver us from bondage. 2, God will redeem us through an outstretched arm. 3, and finally, God will take us to be God's people. And every time we drink a cup of wine, we're going to remember one of those promises and the exact time when God does it. It's like a time machine. The first cup, remember the beginning of the seder, from the Israelites being enslaved until Moses arriving, and we have to stop the suffering. This second cup transports us to the final hours of the plagues when we're going to be rescued and really let out of slavery. So when we drink this cup, this is inches away from the meal, inches away from freedom. And the next 8 items of the seder, we're going to recreate the exact meal that they ate at that time. We wash our hands just like they would have, and we say a blessing. We say a bracha over motzi and matzah and maror, because that's exactly what they did. Moses said to them, hey guys, get ready. The angel of death is coming and the Egyptians are going to give up. So I want you to take some matzah and some maror and punch them together and also take some meat, the Pesach sacrifice, and we are going to eat. And that's what we do. That's what we eat, just like they did. But I warn all of the participants, if you leave after eating, you are still stuck in Egypt, because the Israelites had a Passover meal. That wasn't the end. So come back after you finish eating and schmoozing, because we have still got to get out of Egypt. And speaking of that schmoozing and eating, at the end, we have tzafun. That's the way we get everybody back. We get everybody back after the meal by saying, kids, go look for the Afikomen and bring it back and we'll give you a prize. But what does that have to do with the story at all? Well, here's what the leader might say.
Tzafun, finally, tzafun, tzafun. How was your dinner? Hope it was tasty. Oh, and I hope you saved some room for tzafun. Tzafun is our dessert tonight. Now, normally I would go for a piece of flourless chocolate cake or my favorite Passover cookie, but tonight I just need a little morsel of matzah, because really, who can get enough matzah, am I right? Now I'm just gonna look around the table for that special little Afikomen bag. You remember, it was the one when we did our yachats and we put a half of matzah in a bag. I don't see it anywhere. Somebody stole the Afikomen, and somebody needs to find it right now. So everybody start searching. Let me be clear. We cannot end the seder without finding the Afikomen. And P.S., I hope that whoever does find it gets a really awesome prize, like all their dreams come true, or peace on earth, or a really cool toy. Did anybody find it yet?
Not yet.
Haven't seen it. Well, while people are still searching, I'll just tell you a little bit more about it. Tzafun means hidden or locked away. And all I know is that sometimes hidden treasure is right before your very eyes. Found the Afikomen! Yay! All right. Now all we need to do is divide it up, and everyone just gets a little morsel about the size of an olive.
Wait, what? Wait. I thought, wait, hold on here. Did you say everybody gets a little piece of it? I thought that we said earlier that matzah was Moses. What? We're each going to eat Moses? That can't be. That must be wrong. Remember a certain man from the house of Levi? And by the way, the reason this is called tzafun is because when they hid him, it says in Hebrew, hitzfino. They hid him. Tzafun. It actually says it in the Torah. This is Moses that we were hiding. We can't be eating Moses. That would be a little bit weird. And by the way, I don't know how your household does it, but when the kids find it, and it should be the kids who look for it because his sister was stationed there, they should be given not a prize like she said, but money. Why? Because Pharaoh's daughter says, this must be a Hebrew child. Anyone who can nurse him, I will pay your wages. Now, I tell my second graders a little secret. You see, Shira Klein said, we can't go on with the seder unless somebody finds the Afikomen. And that's true. You know why? Because if no one finds Moses, we don't get out of Egypt. We don't get out of this seder. It's going on forever. Slavery is going. So when you find the Afikomen, you have found Moses. And when you return it to the leader, you don't go like, here you go. No, you hold on to it. Just like Miriam did and said, I can help you out here, but it's going to cost a little money. So when the leader says, who trained you to be so rude? You greedy little child, you. Here's $1. Don't give it back to the leader yet, because the seder can't go on without Moses. You say, $1 seems a little bit small for Moses. How about $5? Why? Who taught you manners, you child, you? Oh, it's not about manners, the child will say. We're reenacting what happened in the Torah. And Pharaoh's daughter didn't say, here, I'll give you money. Pharaoh's daughter said, I will give you your wages. Ve'ani eten et scharech. You name the price. Now I tell my children, you should be careful. You don't want to upset Pharaoh's daughter and say, give me $100. That could be off with your head. But you do want to stretch them a little bit. And if you're extra nice, you could say, give me $2 and everybody else here $1, and then you can get the Afikomen back. And that should go back and forth a little bit until the Afikomen comes into the hands of the leader. And the leader will give it out, at which point you're going to raise your hand and say, feel a little uncomfortable about this. You are breaking off a piece of cracker and you're asking us to eat it. Sounds a little bit like the Eucharist. My Catholic friends tell me that they go to receive communion and they get a little piece of wafer, which is like a matzah, and they eat it. And I think they're saying that they're eating the body of Christ. Are you saying that's what we're doing here? Well, in fact, yes. We want each of you at this point at the seder to embody the characteristics of Moses, his empathy and emotional identification. The first thing he does is he sees people suffering. We should do that too. He is passionate for justice. Sometimes it leads him to do things that might not be right, like killing, but he is passionate. We should too. We should have the courage to speak truth to power. He confronted Pharaoh. We should also be willing to do that. We should be willing to have an intimate relationship with God. Moses spoke face to face to God. We should practice inspiring oratory despite a speech impediment. We should be passionate about praying for the health and safety of our people. And finally, we should persevere in overcoming our difficulties. When you pass out the Afikomen this time, mention some of these and say, we're looking for you, especially the younger generation, to be our future leaders, our future guides, just as Moses did. And then we can say Birkat Hamazon. And why do we say the Birkat Hamazon, you ask? Well, because that's what we do at every single meal, especially meals on the holiday. But you say it should go with the story. Well, it turns out that after the leader, after Pharaoh says, you can go, Pharaoh says something very odd to Moses. When you go, uverachtem gam oti, you should also bless me. And we do it. We leave and we do a bracha, only we're not going to bless Pharaoh. We are going to bless the true hero of the story, the one who did take us out and really gave us freedom. And that is Birkat Hamazon, Baruch Ata Adonai, who saved us and got us out. And it's at this point that we drink the third cup of wine. This is the exciting one, everybody. This is the one where we open the door for Eliyahu. And we read that part that Rabbi Chaim talked about, Shvoch Chamatcha, which, by the way, I have had a very big problem with, especially since I like to invite people who are not Jewish to my seder. And it made me a bit uncomfortable to say, okay, we're opening the door for Eliyahu, and we're going to read out something that says, pour out your anger upon the nations that do not call out your name. Why do we do this? It must be with the story here. Well, if you remember, after we got away from Pharaoh, we got to the third promise God made. And that is, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. That's 3 of the third cups. What's the outstretched arm? Well, has something to do with opening a door in which an exit can take place. And oddly enough, a door did open in the story with an outstretched arm, just as we open the door and call out to God, pour out your anger. Well, the children look for Eliyahu. And that's because Moses, when they reach the Sea of Reeds and the Egyptian army are coming after them, holds out his hand, reaches out his hand, and the sea splits open. And so we open up the door to split the sea, and we go through. And the water comes rushing down on the Egyptians. We are reenacting it right here. The sea splits, we open the door, and God's anger flows right back upon the Egyptians. Now, this is a time for discussion still, even though it's a reenactment. Did God really need to destroy the Egyptians that way? Is this the way for us to act? Are we out to destroy our enemies who are after us? Or are we after a way to maybe read in the Santa Cruz Haggadah a different version of this that might inspire us to do things a little bit differently in the future? But first, we have to reenact it. We do have to do it. And then Hallel. We sing. This, if you've stayed this long, is the best part of the seder for some people who know the songs. But the question is, why do we sing now? Can't we just go on to some better dessert or call it quits? Well, if you look at what happens in the story, after they get right out of the Sea of Reeds, Moshe and Miriam lead them in song. This singing should be so wonderful, such hallel and praise, because we made it. We got out of Egypt. And that is a time to be thankful. And that is exactly the time that the fourth cup comes. And why does the fourth cup come? Because there's one more promise God has. I freed you from labor. I delivered you from bondage. I got you through the sea with an outstretched arm, but you're still not my people yet. That comes at Mount Sinai, when I give you the 10 commandments. And this fourth cup is that. We gather at Mount Sinai and take on the responsibility of being the kind of people that this world needs in a broken state. We too will be like Moses, leading the way to fix a world that is unjust in many, many ways. And you would think, we're done. We did. Well, that's not actually done. You know what? On the third moon, they got there, they got to Sinai, they get the 10 commandments, and, there's the golden calf thing. And God says, I will take you to be for me an Am Segula. And finally, we get to Nirtzah. And what is Nirtzah? The end of the seder. It's Rotzeh. It's what we really want. And what do the Israelites feel right there at the edge of Mount Sinai? We got to get to the promised land. Let's get going, which is why we sing Leshana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in the promised land. And so that is what they will sing, and we will then be at the end of the seder. Now, if you didn't remember all of that, don't worry. Just ask lots of questions and just see if you can make any connections to the story, because the Haggadah is meant to encourage us to ask those questions and then to try to connect it to the story and to have a deep conversation with the people around us at an adult level with inclusion of the children and be excited about it. Well, that gives us a few minutes for any questions that you might have. I'm happy, and I'm sure Rabbi Chaim can answer them too.
Thank you so much, Aviv. I know Sherry wrote 2 questions in the chat. Sherry, do you want to?
Yeah. Hi, Aviv. So my first question is, I want to make an inclusive seder, a woman's seder. So instead of saying Ata Adonai, I want to say At Shekinah. So how do I, is it okay to change every blessing to a female version or a more inclusive
Those are 2 different
version?
questions.
Chaim gets first stab at this. Go ahead, Chaim.
Well, we have a Haggadah, and I have them here in the store. They're not, I don't think they're not up on my website, not yet anyways. But Sherry, if you're interested in a feminized expression, or there's an egalitarian Haggadah, I don't think I brought it upstairs with me to show you, but we have the egalitarian Haggadah. That's I think probably on our website. And then there's another one that was married by a woman named Miriam Zislovich. She lives in Israel, in Sfat, and she has, I think, in her version of the Haggadah, which incorporates perhaps some of the things that you're looking for, I think she has a feminized brachot as well.
Okay, and then my other question is now we're including olives for Ukraine, and of course an orange. And
I just saw an acorn. That
yeah, okay.
where we live in Berkeley, it's on Ohlone Native First
Right.
Nation land, and so there's a whole Jewish organization who
We're doing that in Santa Clara Valley too. In
Right.
fact, I'm on the committee. So how
you
do
have to
we
make bigger seder plates
include,
now.
how do we include these things on our plate? And I know plates are now being made, Seder plates are now being made with 8 cups. How do we include it with a brucha, something?
Well, I think what you're wanting to do is brilliant, and I think it's exactly what the rabbis want us to do, which is find the things that are happening in our contemporary experience and recognize how they tie back into the central messages and themes of our ancestral tradition. You know, a Seder plate that now going from 6 dishes to 8 dishes, you know, that may not happen for a generation or two, but nevertheless, well,
You can buy them.
you can buy them, or you could make it, or you could add it onto your, you know, onto your Seder plate that you have. And in a sense, it kind of represents, you know, things are getting crowded here. Things are getting crowded because the reality for all of us to live together and to create a unified wholeness of all of the different types that all these different things represent, then we actually have to be able to be comfortable living closer together with each other too. So there's different ways of interpreting these things, you know, but here it's really up to you. It's like, as you're putting, you might actually want to like have all the ingredients that you want for your Seder plate around. And then at the very, very beginning of the Seder, as people are coming around the table, you say, okay, now we're going to assemble the Seder plate. Now we're going to put on each one of these things, which is representational of something else. And this is why we're doing. Of course, don't expect to finish before 1 or 2 in the morning, but there's nothing that's stopping you from doing that.
So there's no bracha for an orange or an
No, well,
olive or
there
an
is a
acorn.
bracha, and that might, if you're concerned about operating within the strict framework of halacha, then that might become an issue, because the designated type of food to eat before the meal is adamah, right? Which is the karpas, or the potato, or the celery, or the potato chips, or whatever you're eating for karpas. Ha'etz is not designated in the Haggadah as a bracha for that part of the meal. Could you say the Berei Pri Ha'etz, and you know, for an olive that you're going to eat before the meal? According to halacha, that might require that you make a bracha achrona, an after blessing after eating an olive. So that's why I think the rabbis stayed away from eating fruits of trees and kept the ritual focused around the fruits of the earth. But at the very beginning of the meal, you could eat the matzah and come back to eat these the olives or the oranges, and you just make the Berei Pri Ha'etz blessing before eating them.
Okay, and just explain why we're having them on our Seder plate or
That's
on
the
our
most
table
significant
tonight.
thing. Why are we doing it?
Thank you, Sherry.
Okay.
I want to see if Aviv has anything to add, and I know his time is limited.
I'm happy to say a few minutes extra. But Sherry, I agree completely with what Rabbi Chaim said. Here's the goal of the night. The goal is for there to be a story told in as many ways as possible. And that story is, we went from downtrodden to free. And there are lots of ways to tell that story. And as Rabbi Chaim said, the Haggadah actually tells us the more ways you tell that story, the greater the praise should be heaped upon you. The Haggadah actually tells that. It is a guidepost for us to tell the original Ur story, and then we are supposed to heap on as many versions as we can. So you don't need to say a bracha on that olive there. Hopefully what it does, what the Seder plate should do, is encourage people to ask questions. That's weird. Why do you have an olive on your plate? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I'd like to tell you a new story about going from degradation to a future redemption. And that olive is the following story. And we don't need to eat it. We don't need to say a bracha. We just need to keep telling that story over and over again in as many ways and in as modern ways as we can. And not only is it acceptable, it's an encouraged part of the seder itself. So I say, put on as many as you want. However, I didn't get to present this. The seder plate is meant to tell the same exact story visually. So if you want to think about where you put each of them, they're meant to be at different points in the clock of the story. At what point do you want to tell that version of the story of Ukraine or of women's suffrage or any of those in the seder? Then it might be the right place to put it on the seder plate as we hit the other ones in the traditional seder. Now we get to this one. Anyone have any questions about it? Now I can tell you this story.
That's great. Any more questions? I know that Aliza wanted you to present maybe the source that for your information. I don't know if this is something you can forward to me and I can forward to everyone. Maybe the presentation.
Yes, I can do that. I'm also going to put just on the screen right now quickly the name of the book that inspired this all for me. And the book was Leading the Passover Journey, the Seder's Meaning Revealed. In it, Rabbi Laufer refers to more than I had a chance to do and explains it in greater detail. I've added a few things that I've noticed, because once he told me that the story of Exodus is hidden, well, then it was like, I'm going to find as many other connections as I can. But this is an excellent resource. I read it every year again, right before Pesach and before I lead or participate in any of my seders. I can't recommend it highly enough.
So I put a link in the chat to our online bookstore's Haggadah selection, and this book is in that list. So
Wonderful.
you can order that book from the link that I put in the chat.
That's great. Another question from Sherry was, how do you integrate olives and oranges? But I guess if I heard you correctly, you just put it on the table and on the right time, you kind of use it.
Right. So if you know the traditional Haggadah, at one point, the seder leader is supposed to say, unless we point out three things, we have not finished our seder: Pesach, matzah, and maror. And everybody usually shakes their head. Okay, good. Can we go on to the next step? But what the rabbis were hoping is someone would raise their hand and say, well, why those three? What are they supposed to mean? Because what happens next in the Haggadah is then we say, Pesach, what is that about? It's really meant to encourage people to ask. So if some point in the seder, you say, by the way, we have 5 things on our seder plate that you might find strange: orange, olive, acorn, and you wait and no one raises their hand, then you say, oh, what I really encourage everyone to do is to say, why? And as we go on through the seder, whatever I do, just ask like an annoying little child, but why? And sometimes I'll know the answer, and sometimes I won't. And sometimes I'm going to ask the questioner right back, well, what do you think? What does this have to do with the story and what we're living through right now? So just pointing to it and encouraging people to ask opens up the conversation. And that's exactly what the seder was meant to do, and the Haggadah.
That's why you bring a pillow to the seder. People think it's for leaning, but it's really for sleep.
Thank you so much. And the way for my family to wake up is incorporating current songs that we feel that fit the theme that everyone knows. So we kind of incorporate new and old songs. Thank you to both of you. I think you really sparked some ideas and enthusiasm around holding a seder, and it's already, and it's also soon enough that someone can order Haggadah, special Haggadah for this Passover if they want to. So I will share the link to this presentation, and I thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who attended today.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to have been invited to participate with this, and just want to appreciate the community and how far it stretches south of us. and beyond. And we would love to see you come up to Afikomen to shop. We're open on Sunday, 11 to 5. And now we're giving free coffee in the morning from 11 till 12. So come and enjoy and join with us. And I want to wish everybody a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, a fitting and joyous holiday for everybody who participates in it.
And I'm going to second that. If you haven't been to Afikomen, make it a journey, make it a trip, because Berkeley's beautiful too, but that should be your first stop. And thank you, Maya, for organizing it. Also go to the Los Gatos JCC, plenty to see there and do.
Thank you. Happy Passover, everyone.
Chag
Happy
Sameach.
Passover, everybody.
Pesach.
Bye-bye.
Bye.